So a couple days ago, week ago, whenever it was, we talked about GTA and some leaks that came out about that, and now we've got Cyberboy, someone who we've watched quite a bit, talking about GTA leaks, diving into those leaks, and specifically with the title, "This GTA 6 leak confuses me," and I'm curious which one it is. I'm guessing, before we watch it, I'm guessing it's the one about them not being finished the story of the game. Could be wrong, but let's hear what he has to say.
That really does genuinely confuse me.
Start over.
So there's one GTA 6 leak that really does genuinely confuse me, and I didn't really go into it in a previous video as much as maybe I should have. And in today's video, I just want to go through this bit of information and kind of have it as more of a discussion point and get some of your feedback in the comments, but also share some of my insight on it. Now, to give you all some context, a few months ago, a friend of the channel, Game Roll, posted on Twitter the full names of Jason and Lucia.
So this is crazy that he got that right. And then he posted more leaks. So we've already looked at some of these leaks.
We have Lucia Caminos and Jason Duval. Now, this was before trailer 2 or before we had any of that information. And obviously this led to a lot of people asking how we got hold of this information. Well, it's very simple. Someone sent him the information and said, "Hey, my friend works at Rockstar. I have access to some information." And that's all we really had. But there is no getting around the fact that that information was fully correct and that wasn't a blind guess. You can't just guess two very specific names like that. So obviously they had access to information. Now, this person didn't just tell Game Roll that. They also told Game Roll a load of other things about the game, which we do have to give the guy some credit that clearly he has access to some information. But there's one piece of information that came up that got a lot of the community either confused or in a bit of turmoil, and it was this. Supposedly, Lucia has a child in the game, but they don't.
Oh, we're going with the story element. Okay, I was wrong. So before he dives into that, let me quickly. So apparently, the first 3 chapters, which he's going to go into here, are completely done. The 5th chapter, which is apparently the ending chapter, has not even been written yet, and that is weird to me. That doesn't make sense to me, because they definitely would have had an ending when they started writing it. Like, they didn't go into this and had a story and they're like, but how do we finish it? Now, there could be intricacies of that they haven't finished or figured out yet, but they definitely know the ending, because I'm willing to bet they have already long ago recorded all of the voice lines. So that is why I think we need to take what they are saying in these with a bit of a grain of salt. Now, this one specifically is a story element, and I didn't believe this when I heard it either.
Play a big part in the story. Now, just for some context there, the person that they spoke to hasn't played through the whole game. In fact, it's very, very unlikely that anyone other than maybe the top 5 played through the.
You briefly see Lucia's kid at the beginning, but from what my friend played of chapter 1 through 3, they never saw the kid again. So maybe it's a case of my friend not having played enough of the story, or the kid really just isn't in the game that much. We'll have to see. Here's my prediction on this. All right, are you ready for this? I'm going to predict the plot of Lucia in the game. One of 2 things is going to happen, because Rockstar loves doing the family thing, and you see it with like Red Dead. Number 1, at the beginning of the game, you have some sort of dream sequence or flash forward where we see Lucia and Jason's child, but it's not revealed who this child is until later in the game, but it's going to be something very, very brief. That's option 1. I've already said that we're going to get Lucia flashbacks to Liberty Cities. That's a prediction that I've had. And I bet by the end, I think this game is going to take place over a wide period of time. And one of that, maybe the end of the game, is going to have Jason and Lucia having a kid. Maybe it's in the middle. I don't know. That's where I think that comes in. But I don't think it's going to be a predominant part of the story. It'll be a plot point that is used for something like she gets pregnant, and that is like a big part of the story, something like that.
The whole game. In fact, it's very, very unlikely that anyone other than maybe the top 5 people at Rockstar have actually played the full game from start to finish. The reason for that is Rockstar's culture of secrecy. Now, it's not always like that. Getting closer to release, it's very likely that many employees will have an opportunity to actually play through bigger sections of the game. But when it comes to people testing the game, it is almost a 0 chance likelihood that one individual person will get the opportunity to playtest a whole section. They also don't want people to playtest the entire game. They want people to focus in on one section of the game and go through any issues, bugs, problems, or anything like that in those individual sections. And yes, build a rocket boy, you could learn something. So
that's calling out mind's eye. I think that they actually saw a flashback of Lucia. The more I think about it, that's what I'm being sold more and more on, that the flashback was Lucia as a child in Liberty City.
Now, I, of course, many of you may know, I do have some contacts with people at Rockstar and I do have some conversations, but normally my conversations, anything that I have that gives me direct information about Grand Theft Auto 6, I don't discuss on the channel. That's purely out of like maintaining excitement for the game, but also mutual respect for the people I speak to about this information. However, this is where it gets a little bit confusing for me.
I've got contacts, but I'm not going to tell you about it. I actually do believe that.
Because whenever I've spoke to people at Rockstar about this whole Lucia having a kid thing, I've had very mixed responses. In terms of people have either rolled their eyes or replied with laughing faces. It seems like one of those things where people don't want to discuss it. Now, this has led to a lot of different conclusions that myself and many of my fellow creator friends have had, that we're all stuck in the middle, but I do want to share a theory I have, and bear with me.
Okay.
Hopefully you find it
Love this shit.
interesting. So implementing a child into GTA 6, the only way that they could really do it is the same way that they did in Red Dead Redemption 2 with Jack. So basically it's a character that's mentioned in a few cutscenes, appears in a few cutscenes, but it wasn't Arthur's child. So Jack being mentioned in the story, it didn't really matter if Arthur was off doing a load of things because Jack wasn't Arthur's child. I mean, unless, you know, stuff happens, but for all intents and purposes, Jack wasn't written as Arthur's child in the story. Now, if we actually change the roles on that and actually make Lucia, who is obviously a main protagonist of the game, have a child in the game, it does make things a little bit confusing. For example, if Lucia has a child at home, obviously we're off doing things, we're exploring the map, we're doing all these things, she should be at home looking after a child. Now, this has led to another theory that supposedly...
I mean, maybe they have a nanny. She is a strong, independent woman. Let's not jump to conclusions here.
She had a child in Liberty City and she went off to Vice City to go and look after that child and protect that child and bring in some money. The kid being that far away doesn't complement the story, and I can't think of a way that they could write it into the story.
Yeah, it would make she's not wrong. Like if she had a child from a long time ago that's in Liberty Cities, maybe with her mother, because remember that when they said that she grew up in Liberty Cities and her and her mom had this dream of what she could do. If maybe she had a child at teenage, I mean, it could be that. It's like she has a child and they call each other sisters and her mom raised her. They could write something in like that. And then later it's revealed that it's her actual child. Now we're on to something.
In a way that would make Lucia a likable character. Like having this random weird plot hole where she decides to leave her child in another state doesn't make any sense at all. Now this leaves me with a final conclusion. Now this is a very dark conclusion, and to me, I'm only voicing this because I feel like it's probably one of the more likely narratives. Potentially Jason and Lucia had a child that maybe for some reason ended up in a care system. So for example, Lucia went to prison, they obviously took a child off her, and the whole thing is basically
I don't think that's gonna happen either.
Her getting herself into a scenario where she can get her kid back. That would make her quite a noble and likable character. The other option is, of course, that potentially she loses a child and it becomes an anchor point for the story about Jason and Lucia working together as a team and always being together. Now, I can't...
Yeah, if something happens and she loses a child, that's good. And we have flashbacks, and maybe it was in Liberty Cities, and maybe it was actually before Jason. Ooh. I got goosebumps.
Say whether this information has any credibility to it, but I have heard that potentially the child is featured in some form of flashback or some form of like cutscenes going back to Lucia's past. That's the only thing that I've really managed to gravitate towards, but in terms of how that fits into the context of the story, it's really hard to decipher. Now, for the past year, I've always been more on the fence that there won't be a child for Lucia in the game. Main reason for that is mainly because it's difficult to write a child into the game. They're not a character that really can add any value to the main line.
I mean, have you played Red Dead 1?
story in terms of what we can do as a player, but it could potentially be a character that creates an anchor point for the story that helps determine different endings or different outcomes to the game. Just to elaborate on this a bit more and kind of put you in a scenario where Lucia does have a kid, imagine going out, robbing a shop or robbing a bank or doing some activities with Jason to then have to come home and like feed your child, look after your child, or babysit your child, for example. It would feel like a really weird plot hole. So instead, they would have to make it just cutscenes where you come home to your child and then it's the next day. But then they wouldn't be giving that side of the story any attention and it would become completely pointless. But also, if we end up having to actually interact with our child in the game, what would make that really weird overall is that with the attention to detail and realism that Rockstar have put on everything else, as we saw in both Trailer 1, Trailer 2, screenshots, and whatever information we've managed to get out of the game, applying all those essences of realism between a dynamic between Lucia and her child would effectively come off as being really.
Here's where we're going to leave this, because here's my opinion on this. I think he brought up some really good points about how having if they have a current child and they're just like leaving the child at home, that doesn't work. Her leaving her child with her mother in Liberty Cities brings some interesting flashbacks and then maybe a twist later on in the story where maybe this person was introduced as Lucia's sister, and then we find out that when she was 15 she had a child with someone else. Her mom said, I want you to succeed, and sent her away. Some story like that. That's possible too. Or like they're saying, they have a child as an anchor point. Maybe they had a child together, or she had a child earlier and that child died. There's a lot of options here. It's interesting. And it could be a plot point that never actually comes to fruition, but I love this kind of theoretical dive into storytelling and how you can like look at a plot point and be like, well, that doesn't really work, and what you can actually take out of that. But yeah, that's one of the more confusing ones and one of the less believable ones that came out of that. I think the most unbelievable one, though, the most confusing one, is when people said that they're not done Act 5. I think what maybe that means, they mean by that, is it's not fully put together yet and they're just putting polish on it. But they've definitely written Act 5. Like, let's be real here. They've written Act 5 and they've probably recorded everything for it and they've probably done all the animations for it. They're just probably putting polish on it, I would assume. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's huge crunch time there, but I can't wait for this story, man. I think it's going to be one of, if not the best video game story ever told.